David is 45 years old. He is a New York businessman. He sits paralyzed inside his gridlocked car on a deafening Manhattan Avenue. Horns blare endlessly while his phone constantly explodes with urgent notifications. The stifling pressure of millions crushes his chest. He desperately craves just one single second of absolute silence. Now imagine zooming out far beyond the crushing neon lights, beyond our noisy galaxy entirely. You suddenly hit a patch of total nothingness measuring 330 million light-years across. What exactly happened to all this missing dark space? Let us take a step back and examine the sheer weight of our daily existence in any modern metropolis. You are constantly surrounded by the relentless machinery of the American dream. It is an endless cycle of production, ambition, and consumption that simply never sleeps. Think about the intense neon glow of a sprawling city, a brilliant but suffocating blanket of artificial light that completely erases the natural night sky. We live in a culture built on fierce individualism, where every single person is desperately trying to stand out. We are constantly broadcasting our achievements and our struggles into the overwhelming digital ether. You cannot walk down a single concrete block without being bombarded by glowing billboards, blaring sirens, and the vibrating demands of endless notifications. We find ourselves trapped in a magnificent but deeply exhausting cage of our own making. This is the reality of a world populated by billions of incredibly loud, incredibly busy human beings. We have filled every available physical and psychological space with the noise of our own ambition. Even when you drive out to the supposed quiet of the suburbs, the hum of the interstate and the glow of the strip malls follow you like a persistent shadow. We operate under the strange assumption that the entire universe must be just as cluttered, noisy, and densely packed as our daily commute. We project our own exhausting reality onto the cosmos, imagining a galaxy filled with bustling alien empires. Because our immediate environment is so densely packed with information, our brains literally struggle to comprehend the concept of true emptiness. We have forgotten what it feels like to experience absolute silence. But here is where it gets incredibly interesting. I want you to take all of that overwhelming noise, all of that frantic American hustle, and mentally place it right next to the Boötes void. We are talking about a region of space so unimaginably empty that it actively mocks everything we know about how the universe should look. If you were to take our entire solar system and drop it dead into the center of this void, the experience would be entirely unrecognizable. You would not see a single twinkling star when you looked up at the night sky from your backyard. There would be no distant galaxies visible to the naked eye, no comforting glow of the Milky Way stretching across the horizon. The sky would be an endless, unbroken canvas of absolute pitch black. It is a kind of sensory deprivation on a magnificent cosmic scale. Let us imagine what that would do to the human psyche, a species so addicted to visual stimulation and constant connection. For most of our history, we have looked up at the stars and used them to navigate our oceans and build our mythologies. The stars have always been our ultimate companions, a silent audience watching our chaotic civilization unfold below. But inside the Boötes void, humanity would have grown up completely alone in the dark, entirely unaware that anything else existed beyond the boundaries of our own lonely solar system. We would have assumed that our tiny bubble of light was the only thing standing against an infinite ocean of eternal nothingness. This extreme contrast between our hyper-connected society and the profound isolation of the void is exactly what makes it so utterly mesmerizing. We spend our entire lives desperately fighting for just a little bit of personal space away from the crushing demands of modern civilization. We build high fences, put on noise-canceling headphones, and dream of escaping to remote places just to find a momentary pause. Yet, out there in the deep expanse of the universe, there is a monument to emptiness so vast that it makes our greatest desires for isolation seem entirely insignificant. It forces us to confront a reality that is completely detached from our daily struggles with traffic jams and social media algorithms. The universe has created a sanctuary of silence so profound that it challenges the very core of our busy existence. Let's imagine for a second that you could magically drive your car straight up into the night sky at highway speeds. If you were cruising down Route 66 at 70 miles per hour, leaving behind the billboards and the neon signs of the American sprawl, it would take you a while just to reach the edge of our own solar system. Now let's say you push the gas pedal all the way down and somehow accelerate to the absolute speed of light. You are now moving at 186,000 miles per second. At that incomprehensible velocity, flying past dead planets and burning stars, it would still take you 330 million years just to cross the Boötes void from one side to the other. We simply cannot begin to rationally process a number like that. It is not mathematically possible for the human mind to grasp such a staggering expanse of absolute nothingness. Because it feels completely impossible, let's accept the premise that we can somehow teleport you directly into the dead center of this colossal anomaly. Let's imagine you are floating there in a spacesuit, completely untethered, and you open your eyes. What exactly do you see? The answer is deeply unsettling. You see absolutely nothing at all. If you look up, there is no faint glow of a distant nebula. If you look down, there is no familiar constellation to guide you home. Our own Milky Way is so incomprehensibly far away that its combined light from hundreds of billions of stars cannot pierce the suffocating darkness surrounding you. It is a sensory deprivation tank built on a galactic scale. In every possible direction, for millions upon millions of light years, there is only an impenetrable, pitch-black abyss. Does that thought make your chest feel a little tight? It really should. This is where the existential dread truly begins to creep in and take hold of your rational mind. When we stand in a remote desert in Nevada or Utah and look up at the Milky Way, we feel profoundly small, but we still feel like we are part of a grand, beautiful structure. We are comforted by the sheer density of the cosmos. But the Boötes void strips away all of that cosmic comfort in an instant. It forces us to confront a terrifying reality about our own insignificance. You are essentially a microscopic speck of biological dust suspended inside a vacuum so impossibly vast that the entire history of human civilization would play out in a fraction of a millisecond on its timeline. Are we really as important as we think we are? How can anything matter when such an overwhelming emptiness exists right in our cosmic backyard? But here is where it gets interesting. To truly understand the scale of this terrifying emptiness, we have to look at what should actually be there. In a standard patch of the universe this size, astronomical models dictate that we should easily find around 10,000 individual galaxies, 10,000 massive structures, each swirling with billions of stars, planets, and potentially countless alien civilizations. Yet, when we point our most advanced telescopes into the heart of the Boötes void, we find almost nothing. We have counted perhaps 60 isolated galaxies wandering aimlessly through the dark. 60 out of 10,000. Nobody knows where they went or if they existed in the first place. It is like walking into downtown Manhattan at rush hour and finding only a single person standing on an empty sidewalk. You would expect chaos and light, but instead you get an eerie, unexplained ghost town. Let's imagine another scenario that truly puts this isolation into a chilling perspective. Let's say that our own Milky Way galaxy was not located where it is right now, but was instead placed perfectly in the center of the Boötes void. If our solar system had evolved in that exact spot, with Earth spinning around our sun in the middle of that dead zone, our entire history would be drastically different. Every astronomer from Galileo to Hubble would have looked through their telescopes and seen nothing but an empty black canvas. We would not have even known that other galaxies existed in the universe until the 1960s, when our deep space technology finally became powerful enough to see past the edge of the void. For our entire human history, we would have believed with absolute certainty that our lonely galaxy was the only thing that existed in the entire universe. Why does the universe have such a massive blind spot? Perhaps the more terrifying question is whether we are actually the lucky ones for living in a crowded neighborhood, or if that infinite silence is the true default state of nature. Let's imagine you are baking a massive, galactic-sized blueberry muffin. You mix the batter, toss in the berries, and expect them to be spread out nicely once it comes out of the oven. In astrophysics, this perfectly reasonable expectation is called the cosmological principle. It basically states that on a grand scale, the universe is supposed to be uniform and isotropic. Everywhere you look, matter should be smoothly distributed like a well-stirred soup of stars and cosmic dust. You point your telescope left, you see galaxies. You point it right, you see more galaxies. It should be balanced across this big old universe. We like this idea because it makes the math work and keeps textbooks relevant. So, how do we react when the universe completely ignores our rules? This brings us right to the sheer physical absurdity of the Boötes void. It shatters that fundamental rule of cosmic uniformity. How do you even begin to explain a massive chunk of nothing sitting in the middle of a crowded universe? It makes zero logical sense. Standard models of physics completely break down and throw their hands up when you stare into that dark patch. Let's accept for a moment that gravity pulls things together over time to form structures. Sure, you get galaxy clusters, and naturally you get empty spaces between them, but you absolutely do not get a void this insanely huge just by chance. It is a statistical nightmare. It is like finding a perfectly empty, silent city block right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan during rush hour. You immediately know something is terribly off, and you start questioning your own sanity. Now listen carefully, because here is where it gets truly wild. If the universe has been expanding uniformly since the Big Bang, there simply has not been enough time for a void of this ridiculous magnitude to form naturally through standard gravitational clearing. It is a physical impossibility based on our current understanding of space and time. The cosmic clock simply prohibits it. The galaxies moving away from each other are fast, but not that fast. To clear out an area that massive, the matter would have to move at speeds violating the laws of physics. How do we resolve these apparent contradictions? Perhaps our foundational formulas are flat out wrong. Maybe there is a completely different, unseen mechanism at play here that we have not even comprehended. You do not just wake up and find hundreds of millions of light years of missing real estate without a trace. That is a massive ask for standard physics to brush under the rug. Cosmologists are scratching their heads because this void acts like a giant cosmic middle finger to the structural rules we swear by. Let's say you throw a giant handful of glowing sand onto a black canvas. You expect a random but generally even scatter across the board. You definitely do not expect a massive, terrifyingly empty circle right in the center with 0 grains of sand inside it. What could possibly push all that heavy galactic matter away so cleanly? It feels as if some unseen force is acting as a cosmic bouncer, actively kicking galaxies out of the club. We really have to ask ourselves what we are actually looking at when we peer into that darkness. Some might argue it is just a glitch in our observational tools. That is untrue, because multiple independent surveys confirm its chilling existence. Is it a massive, invisible wall of dark matter hiding the light from us? Maybe, but even that feels like a desperate stretch to save our failing models. Every single time we try to plug this specific region into our most advanced supercomputers, the simulation basically screams at us in error codes. It tells us, mathematically, that this thing should not exist. So what exactly is going on in the dark? We might be entirely missing a fundamental law of physics. The deeper we look into it, the less we actually know. The existence of this void forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that our grasp of the cosmos is fragile. Let us pull back from the freezing temperatures of intergalactic space and plummet back down to a tiny blue marble spinning wildly in the dark. We are plunging through the thick layers of our atmosphere, descending straight into the biting wind of the American Midwest, sweeping off the dark waters of Lake Michigan. Welcome to Chicago. It is a sprawling, neon-lit grid of concrete and steel, heavily populated by nearly 9 million people frantically chasing their own fragmented versions of the American dream. The city is an insatiable beast that never actually powers down. Even deep into the dead of night, the elevated L trains rattle aggressively over rusted tracks, showering brief sparks onto the damp streets below, while police sirens wail endlessly in the distant neighborhoods. The collective hum of millions of air conditioners, heating vents, and car engines creates an oppressive, suffocating blanket of white noise. It is an overwhelming symphony of human existence, a constant reminder that you are entirely surrounded by the relentless machinery of modern society at every single second of the day. Right in the middle of this suffocating urban sprawl sits a cramped apartment, where the faint glow of a smartphone screen cuts sharply through the darkness. Meet Sarah. She is a 22-year-old university student currently drowning in the heavy expectations of a hyper-competitive world. It is exactly 2 in the morning. She is sitting cross-legged on the cold hardwood floor of her tiny bedroom, tightly wrapped in a faded blanket, leaning her heavy head against a freezing window pane that looks out over a dense forest of skyscrapers. Sarah is exhausted. She is physically drained from grinding through endless research assignments, studying for brutal midterm exams, and working part-time shifts at a crowded downtown coffee shop where rushed customers demand their complicated espresso orders with zero patience. But more than that, she is mentally exhausted by the sheer volume of existence happening around her at all times. She is trapped in a cruel paradox that defines our current generation. She lives in a massive metropolitan hub packed tightly with millions of striving souls, separated from her neighbors by nothing more than a few inches of cheap apartment drywall, yet she has never felt more profoundly isolated in her entire life. Her phone constantly demands her attention with a barrage of group texts she does not have the emotional energy to answer, curated social media feeds showing former classmates living impossibly perfect lives, and breaking news alerts broadcasting the endless anxieties of a chaotic world. It is a relentless, inescapable state of digital and physical claustrophobia. Now listen carefully, because here is where it gets incredibly fascinating. When the overwhelming weight of her daily reality becomes far too heavy to bear, Sarah does not open Instagram to numb her brain, and she does not scroll blindly through endless short-form videos to distract herself from the mounting anxiety. Instead, she opens an astronomical star map application. Her tired thumbs slowly swipe across the digital cosmos, dragging the glowing screen past familiar constellations, past the dense, sparkling spiral arms of our own Milky Way, and out into the vast, uncharted territories of the deep universe. She zooms out further and further, aggressively pinching the glass screen until the brilliant clusters of galaxies shrink into tiny, insignificant specks of dust against an endless pitch-black background. She keeps navigating the digital void with intense purpose until she finally finds it. She centers her screen entirely on that massive, inexplicable spherical region of absolute nothingness we were just exploring. She stares deeply into the digital representation of the Boötes void. For most astronomers and physicists, this staggering emptiness represents a terrifying anomaly that breaks our fundamental understanding of how the universe is supposed to work. It is considered an existential nightmare of isolation. But looking at this massive expanse of nothingness at 2 in the morning, Sarah does not feel any existential dread whatsoever. She does not feel an ounce of fear. Looking at a desolate place where no stars shine, where no planets orbit, and where no digital signals or human voices can ever possibly reach you, she feels a sudden overwhelming sense of profound relief. In her racing mind, that unimaginable void is not an eerie cosmic graveyard. It is the ultimate, perfect escape from the crushing density of her Chicago apartment. It is a pristine sanctuary. If she could somehow fold space and time, she would willingly and instantly teleport herself right into the dead center of that 330 million light-year expanse of pure, undisturbed emptiness. She imagines floating there alone, completely untethered from the relentless app notifications, the soaring city rent prices, the deafening police sirens, and the heavy expectations of a society that never stops moving. There would be no impending deadlines. There would be no toxic social comparisons. There would be absolutely no noise. She does not want to conquer the universe or uncover its deepest scientific secrets. She just wants silence. So how do we actually explain a cosmic anomaly that completely defies our fundamental understanding of physics? American astronomers first stared into this massive patch of nothingness, and their immediate instinct was to lean into wild science fiction. We have been raised on a cultural diet of alien invasions, massive galactic empires, and grand interstellar conspiracies. So naturally, the internet and even theoretical physicists started whispering about the Kardashev scale. What if this colossal region of space is not actually empty at all? Let's imagine an incredibly advanced Type 3 civilization has simply conquered that entire sector of the universe. If you build enough Dyson spheres around every single star in a galaxy, you effectively block all visible light from reaching our telescopes. It is a brilliantly terrifying thought that plays right into our deepest conspiracy theories about who is really running the cosmos. You can almost picture an unimaginably vast alien empire methodically turning off the lights across hundreds of millions of light years. But the real secret is that the laws of thermodynamics will always betray you. It does not matter how advanced your technology gets. An alien civilization might successfully encapsulate thousands of galaxies to harvest their energy, but they would still radiate massive amounts of waste heat. Our infrared telescopes would look at that supposedly empty patch of sky and see a blazing inferno of thermal radiation. Instead, when we point our most sensitive thermal imaging equipment at the Boötes void, we find absolutely nothing but the freezing baseline temperature. The alien empire theory completely falls apart under the cold scrutiny of thermodynamics. If it is not an expanding empire of aliens playing hide-and-seek, we must look for a natural alternative. Another explanation for this massive discrepancy might be an invisible population. We know that dark matter makes up a massive portion of our universe. This invisible material does not emit or reflect any light, making it extremely difficult to detect as it acts like an invisible scaffolding holding entire galaxies together. Some theorists propose that the Boötes void is actually a colossal concentration of dark matter, packed heavily with supermassive black holes. It acts like a giant cosmic shadow, swallowing the light of anything trapped inside its gravitational grip. But the physical evidence stubbornly refuses to cooperate with our creative attempts to solve the mystery. If there was that much invisible mass clumped together in one single place, we would definitely witness extreme gravitational lensing. The light from distant galaxies behind the void would be heavily distorted, bending and stretching around the invisible mass like a funhouse mirror. This mind-bending phenomenon has been successfully observed and carefully documented in many other galaxy clusters. We do not see any of those telltale optical illusions when we observe the edges. So how do we resolve these contradictions when both theories completely fail us? This brings us back to the most scientifically grounded explanation that cosmologists currently debate. Think about how soap bubbles behave when they cluster together in a sink, expanding and eventually merging into one another. Scientists believe that the universe is structured like a cosmic web of filaments. Empty spaces are constantly expanding between them. Over billions of years, smaller voids might have crashed into each other, bursting their borders to create one monstrous supervoid. It is a perfectly logical explanation that uses the standard model of cosmic expansion to explain the seemingly unexplainable. We can easily picture these massive and chaotic celestial soap bubbles popping together, combining in the absolute dark over countless millennia, yet even this perfectly rational bubble theory severely struggles. It cannot account for the sheer scale of this specific cosmic void. The timeline of our entire universe simply has not existed long enough for standard cosmic bubbles to merge into something this massive. It is as if the cosmos is deliberately hiding a crucial puzzle piece that we are not yet intellectually equipped to understand. We are left quietly staring at a truly terrifying and entirely unexplainable gap in our reality that actively resists every single logical framework we throw at it. We have spent all this time staring into the abyss, building up these grand, terrifying narratives about what might be lurking in the dark. We imagine ancient civilizations harvesting entire galaxies, or invisible walls of dark matter crushing everything in their path. We project our own deepest anxieties onto that massive blank space, letting the sheer scale of the Boötes void overwhelm our senses until the existential dread feels almost suffocating. It is so easy to look at a 330 million light-year stretch of absolute nothingness and feel a profound sense of horror. We are naturally terrified of the dark, terrified of being completely isolated, and terrified of the idea that perhaps the universe is mostly just a cold, dead expanse waiting to swallow us whole. We treat the emptiness as if it is a tragic mistake in the cosmic architecture, a wound in the fabric of reality that somehow needs to be rapidly healed or fully explained away. But what if we have this completely backward? Now listen carefully, because this is where the entire perspective shifts. What if the emptiness of the Boötes void is not a nightmare, but rather the ultimate cosmic relief? We look at that staggering silence and we feel fear because our modern brains have been intensely conditioned to hate empty space. Think about how we live our lives today, especially in this hyper-connected, relentlessly driven culture where the American dream feels like a treadmill. We are terrified of silence. If we have a free hour on our calendar, we immediately fill it with a meeting, a podcast, or endless scrolling. If a room gets too quiet, we instinctively reach for our screens to drown out the stillness with a stream of artificial noise. We have built a world where every single square inch of physical and mental real estate must be occupied, monetized, or optimized. We project this same frantic, restless energy outward into the stars, assuming that a good universe must be a crowded, noisy, constantly productive universe. When you strip away our modern biases, the Boötes void stops looking like a graveyard and starts looking like a sanctuary. It is the one place in the known universe that has completely opted out of the chaotic, violent grind of cosmic evolution. Out there, in the deepest pockets of that void, there are no hypernovas obliterating star systems with deadly radiation. There are no black holes violently tearing apart neighboring planets. There are no crowded galactic neighborhoods where celestial bodies are constantly crashing into one another in a never-ending war for gravitational dominance. The void is entirely free from the spectacular violence that defines the rest of the universe. It is untouched by the chaos of creation and destruction. It just exists, perfectly still and perfectly silent, resting in the most pure and primal state of nature imaginable. There is a profound, almost overwhelming beauty in that level of absolute stillness. We spend our entire lives desperately trying to carve out just 5 minutes of genuine peace. We download meditation apps, we pay for sensory deprivation tanks, we drive hours out into the wilderness just to escape the relentless hum of the city, the emails, the notifications, the endless demands on our attention. We are a deeply tired species constantly searching for a place where we can just stop existing for the benefit of someone else. And yet, when we finally look up and find the ultimate quiet room, a pristine vault of silence stretching for hundreds of millions of light years, our first instinct is to panic. We fail to recognize that the Boötes void is holding exactly what we have been searching for all along. It is the ultimate off-the-grid destination, a place where no signal can ever reach you, where no one can ever ask anything of you, and where the heavy burden of modern existence simply dissolves. Maybe the true paradox is not why the void is so empty, but why we are so afraid of a little peace and quiet. When you really sit with the thought, the idea of floating in the center of that immense darkness no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like a release. It feels like finally being able to take off a heavy backpack after a lifelong hike. In a century where our greatest collective disease is chronic overstimulation, perhaps we do not need the universe to be completely full of advanced aliens and megastructures to find meaning. Perhaps the most comforting thought in the world is knowing that, somewhere out there, a massive part of the universe is just resting peacefully in absolute silence. It is quite simply the quietest room in the entire cosmic house. We have spent centuries desperately trying to fill every blank space on our cosmic maps with rigid equations and strict definitions. The unknown fundamentally terrifies our modern minds because we are obsessed with having absolute control over our surroundings. We construct massive orbital telescopes and run endless supercomputer simulations to convince ourselves that we fully understand this vast universe. Yet the absolute greatest gift that this colossal expanse of nothingness gives us is the beautiful reminder that our knowledge is limited. There is a profound and deeply sacred beauty in accepting that our current physics might just be a tiny footnote in a grander story. We are forced to stand at the edge of this unimaginable dark cosmic ocean and peacefully embrace the beautiful inherent ignorance of our human species. When David finally escapes that gridlocked Manhattan Avenue and steps out of his car, the relentless noise of the American machine continues to hum aggressively around him. Sirens blare in the distance while subway grates exhale metallic breath into the bitterly cold night air around him. Millions of ambitious people are frantically rushing through the crowded streets to chase their own chaotic, exhausting versions of traditional success. But now, as he tilts his tired head back to look past the glowing digital billboards and towering corporate skyscrapers, his perspective shifts completely. That heavy, suffocating feeling in his chest begins to slowly dissipate into the freezing winds blowing off the Hudson River. He finds an incredibly strange sense of solace, knowing that a place untouched by relentless expectations and demanding deadlines truly exists. 1,000 miles away in a cramped Chicago apartment, Sarah finally closes her laptop and turns off the glowing digital star maps. The deep existential dread she felt earlier in the night transforms into something entirely different and unexpectedly comforting. She realizes that being a tiny, insignificant speck in this magnificent universe is not a curse but a profound psychological liberation. Leaning against her frosty window pane, she understands that the great dark expanse is not staring back at her with terrifying malice. Both of these individuals, separated by the sprawling American landscape, find a silent unity in this profoundly comforting realization. They know the universe is not entirely filled with burning chaos, aggressive expansion, and the constant pressure to endlessly produce. They take a long, deep breath and let the overwhelming noise of the modern world completely fade away into the quiet background of their tired minds. Somewhere out there in the freezing dark, A staggering cosmic expanse, spanning 330 million light-years, is patiently waiting. It stands as the ultimate monument to emptiness, peacefully holding on to the most absolute and perfect silence just for them, forever.